Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Soya and Baila's World. Soya is away again, and she's busy, and hopefully she'll be back next week. In the meantime, here's your hostess, Baila. Good
Hi,
evening, Baila.
good
It's great
evening,
to be here
everyone.
as always. Let's get right to the heart of it. First of all, Baila, there's a lot going on in the Middle East as always, and the last week or so has been a continued state of
Unrest.
unrest, and
Un-
they've been the Palestinians have actually been protesting en masse, ENMASS, en masse against Hamas. True or untrue, real or unreal. Bela, what's your take? I have my views on what's
well,
going
it's
on there.
there's always something exciting going on. Unfortunately, in the negative, where the Gazans are concerned. But what's really interesting about it is that this week, thousands of Gazans have been staging unprecedented protests against Hamas. Now, where it really gets interesting. Hamas has claimed that the demonstrations are focused on Israel, despite the protesters clearly expressing frustration with Hamas's decision to launch the October 7th massacre that led to the ongoing war and the Iran backed group's control of humanitarian aid in the coastal enclave. So let me explain to you what's going on. What
Well,
is
I, I
going
have
on?
I have a particular view, and my view relates to the fact that when they were releasing hostages, you saw that the vast majority of these so-called civilians that are now protesting against Hamas were dancing and singing and participating in what seemed to be some sort of a mass party rather than just the release of hostages in whatever condition they were in. In addition to that, um, all the polls that were done all throughout this since October 7th of 2023 revealed that probably 80% or very close to it, or maybe even a little more, actually supported Hamas. So I tend to be extremely suspicious of anything coming out of that area, out of the Gaza in general, and suspicious of the people there and what are their actual motives. Now, I have a view of this, if I may, Bela, or should you want to
Yeah,
intervene for
no,
a
go
second? I
ahead.
noticed.
Yeah, please go
Let,
ahead.
let, let me give you my view. In light of the fact that now Israel has basically, with the support of the Trump administration, a carte blanche to do what it needs to do and what it probably should have done, had not the Biden administration been standing in the way back then when it happened, to go ahead and destroy Hamas, which means leveling what's left of it there. And it means the so-called civilians are more endangered, even though Israel still does what it has always done. It's still telling them where to move aside, get out of the way. We're going to come here, go there. Israel is the most moral army in the history of warfare in the history of the world,
Well,
and it
that
does
we
everything
know.
to protect the any possible harm to alleged civilians, so-called civilians. And I say it like this always because I don't believe that they're civilians because they participated in what happened October 7th. They not only were complicit, they actually participated. So I think that they're realizing now that they've reached the point, and Hamas has very little which to fight back. Most of their heads have been already cut down, and their basic fighting force has been all but eliminated. So I think that Hamas, they feel at this point that in order to survive, it's a question of survival of the fittest. They have to stand up against Hamas simply as a matter of survival, because otherwise they think that they may get very well get wiped off the map with Hamas. So I think that's one primary motive. I think there's a second primary motive here as well. And I don't know which motive is there first or second. But my particular view of the thing is that they know that it is now within Israel's purview, and because with the Trump administration support, to eventually move these Gazans out of Gaza, move these Gazans out
It
of
is
Gaza.
that is the plan. That it is the plan to move them out. But they've always led horrible lives. The Gazans were never happy. The leaders, they're living it up. But the regular residents, no, they've always been suffering. It's nothing new.
You're absolutely correct. But the reason they've been suffering and the reason that they have not created a Singapore of the Middle East over there is because Hamas has been ruling over them, and basically, and they have had this ongoing. It's a religious dispute. It's not a land dispute. Let's understand this. This is ongoing. The concept that they want all of it. They want to destroy Israel, and they never let that out of their
It's
sight.
not about fighting for land. That's not what this is
That's right.
about.
They
This is
want
about
the
destruction.
destruction.
When you're dealing with a group of people who just want to see destruction, you can't sit down around the table and talk peace. What does Hamas want? What do the Palestinians want? They want Israel to cease existing, for every Jew to, God forbid, die and no longer exist in the world. So how do you talk peace with people like that? You can't. There's no way to make it work. But at the same time, they're not living well. They've never lived well. Do you know that in some Arab villages, they don't even have indoor plumbing? There exist villages today, in this day and age, that don't have indoor plumbing. They have outhouses.
You're
It's
correct, Baila.
mind-boggling.
It is, but Baila, remember that they have not been living well by choice. It's not as though they didn't have the money to build an infrastructure that would support schooling,
For
that
the
would support
leaders, but
hospitals, that would
the
support.
residents are not by
Wait.
choice.
Wait, you said something about not interrupting.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
working on it. Anyway, the bottom line is that all that money that went in was used to build a massive tunnel system larger than the New York City subway
Yes.
system, and to
Yes.
arm them and to place
Yes.
bombs and missiles and attack sites right in the middle of hospitals and schools and even in private
That's right.
homes, rather
And using
rather than
people as
using
human
this
shields.
massive amount of funds that came both from Israel and from
That's
the rest
right.
of the world, the United
That's right.
States, from us here at home, and from others across the world, to build an infrastructure, which is like Trump is dreaming about now, which could have been it could have been a shining city on the river that could have been a Singapore, and
Unbelievable.
a beautiful. It could have been, they could have been making money with hotels, and they could have had schools,
That's
and they
right.
could have had everything, but they chose
That's
not.
right.
Now, nonetheless, despite the fact,
Tourist attraction. They could have made this a
right,
tourist attraction and
tourist
made
attraction, this could
millions
have
of
been done
dollars.
millions. They could have been rich. All these Gazans could have been rich, but nevertheless, that's not the way it happened. So, notwithstanding the fact, Bela, that they have suffered, and because they were not living the way they should have or could have, they still don't want to leave. These protests get the world to look at it and say, hey, look, they're turning against Hamas now. They don't want Hamas anymore. So we don't have to expel them. If they're going to get rid of Hamas and they're not going to turn, they're going to build a new infrastructure with a totally new ruling assembly or whatever it is that they do over there. Well, then there's no reason to have to throw them out, to have to remove them from the Gazan Strip. So I think that is their other motivation. One primary motivation, survival. Second motivation is they don't want to leave. And the reality is as though Trump is right. As Gaza stands right now, it is basically a destroyed parking lot. You have to get out anyway
There's
in order
nothing
to
there.
rebuild. In order to rebuild, you
It's
must get out, and it must to rebuild.
it's
So
rubble. It's all rubble.
whatever,
You
right?
can't even live like that.
So Bela, these are my view of why these. Again, I see it as a very selfish. Their motives are as selfish and as nefarious as ever. I do not see their motives as being truthful and benign. I don't. I'm sorry.
And meanwhile, Hamas is embarrassed. So they're saying, "Oh no, the demonstrations have nothing to do with the Gazans being against us. It's against Israel. The protests are
Well,
against Israel."
they're going to say that. They're
Yeah,
going to
look,
play it out. They're going to
and when
say that.
exactly do they say things that are true?
Never, never,
There you go.
ever. You can't
There you
trust
go.
terrorists, liars, cheaters. Everything that they say is not true. Speaking of which, I'm very, very delighted to hear that Governor Huckabee, Governor, Minister, Pastor Huckabee, who is an evangelical Christian, a firm supporter of the state of Israel and the Jewish people and their right as the indigenous people of the land of Israel to live there. I am delighted that he has been approved by the Senate hearings, and I knew it was going to happen. I just didn't know why they dragged it out so long, why they kept them on the burner to as long as they seem to can. But that's the Democrats for you. But in any event, um, we have a little clip that we're going to add in showing you something about what Governor Huckabee had said. And he made it abundant. You want to take this, Baylor? What he had made
Yeah,
abundantly clear,
yeah. We're
please.
gonna we're gonna
I'm
watch
not
the
going to
clip,
interrupt.
I also want to point something else out that we're very happy that Mike Huckabee is President Donald Trump's nominee for U.S. ambassador to Israel. Um, he attempted to distance himself this past Tuesday from his past controversial statements about the conflict between Israel and the Palestinian people. He pledging on Capitol Hill to carry out the president's priorities, not mine. Did you watch that? Did
I
you watch
did,
him
but
say that?
I believe, Baylor, that his priorities, his own personal priorities, and he's been to Israel over 100 times. He knows what the West Bank is, that it's Judea and Samaria, named after the Jewish people that live there, because they are the true indigenous people in the state of
Right.
Israel, including Gaza as well. The Palestinians are not the original Philistines. They were from Crete and they were just invaders. And it's a long story, but that's not the history. We're not giving a history lesson now. But
Right.
I believe very firmly, Bela, that Governor Huckabee's view is absolutely in sync with
Right.
President Trump's, or
No,
should I
no,
say
for
President
sure, for
Trump's
sure.
is in
No,
sync with Governor
absolutely. I'm
Huckabee.
not saying that, but I did want to put that out there. Look, Huckabee is a well-known evangelical Christian and a strong supporter of Israel, which typically the evangelical Christians are. So, you know, he had to take on, the critical post in Jerusalem, and days after he won the re-election on a campaign promise to end the now 17-month war in Gaza. He did. He
Absolutely,
promised that.
he did, and he will do what he can, but he will do everything from the perspective of a firm, stalwart supporter of truth and justice, which is the side of Israel, against evil and lies, which is the side of the Gazans, or the so-called Palestinians again. Okay,
Yes.
I'm going to use my quotation marks. And okay, and that's going to be, and that's the very same side that Trump is on. And Trump has already
Right.
demonstrated that, continues to demonstrate that. So
Right.
you're going to have a
But
look at
also,
that, ladies and gentlemen. A couple of words that he said. We'll add that in. And now I'm ready to give it to you, Bela. Pull out, and I have two words that I want to define
I
to
yeah,
our
but
audience.
what's also very much expected is that while Republican senators applauded Huckabee's staunch support for America's closest ally, Israel, um, the Democrats questioned his past rhetoric about Palestinians deemed extreme by even some pro-Israel groups and contradicting long-standing U.S. policy in the region.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to point out, when you're listening to Bela, you're listening to a renowned journalist who has been in the a field of journalism, who has written articles, innumerable amounts, uncountable amounts of articles, writing, has been on TV, has had her own TV program, has had her own radio show. She's virtually, syndicated. So you're talking to a real pro over here, and she knows exactly. So don't think she's just on
I'm going
our,
to hire you as my
that she's just
publicist.
that
That's
she's
it.
just like
That's
me,
it.
just an ordinary, an or.
Forget about being my co-host. You're now hired as
Well,
my
I want
official publicist.
our audience to know that who you are, and that you're much more than just our hostess on this show. You're not just like me. I'm just an ordinary guy
You're not an
who's
ordinary
no,
guy.
I
You're
am. I
you're
am just an ordinary
you're
guy. I did a
wonderful.
radio show for a couple of years, yes, and I'm doing the podcast. But it's an honor to work together with you, Bela.
Oh,
You
the
know,
honor is mine.
and anyway, let me get on, Bela. Step aside. One more little thing I wanted to define for our audience. There's a continuous use by all of those that protest against Israel. They talk of Israel as a colonialist entity,
Yeah.
colonialism.
Yeah.
This is a word we've used again and again and again. For the record, I'm going to pull it up right now. I want to read the definition of colonialism. I have it here on my phone. It is a noun: the policy or practice of acquiring full or partial political control over another country, occupying it with settlers and exploring it and exploiting it economically. Again, the policy or practice of acquiring full or partial control over another country, occupying it with settlers, and exploiting it economically. Now, let me tell you why, ladies and gentlemen, why this does not apply in Israel. In order to be colonialists, you have to be occupying someone else's land, someone else's territory.
Right.
You have to be settling somebody else's land, be settlers on somebody else's, and then exploiting somebody else's property and rights economically. But that's not happening in Israel. Not in any part of Israel, not in the heartland, Judea, Samaria, not in Gaza when they did have. Now they're not out of Gaza altogether. Right. Because the Jews are historically, this is a fact, despite the lies and the bull that you hear on many different podcasts and news sites or whatever, that the so-called Palestinians are indigenous. They are not. They are Arabians from different parts of Arab land. They are not the original Philistines. They have no connection to them at all. Only the Jews have thousands of years of true history, and they've been there, and there's always been a remnant. There's always been some Jews occupying some area of the land because it belongs to the Jews. So the Jewish people and the Israelis are not colonialists because you're not colonialists in your own country. If you're occupying Judea and Samaria, the so-called West Bank, you're occupying Judea and Samaria because it is called Judea and Samaria because it belonged to the Jews. It was part of the ancient kingdom of David, and it was given to the Jews by God. In the book of Genesis, they got a lot of stuff. Ishmael, the children of Abraham from Ishmael, they got a lot of land, vast swaths of land.
Yeah, they did.
We Jewish people got a tiny little piece, smaller than New Jersey, or maybe the size of New Jersey.
And you know what?
And that was given to them by God.
And even though this small little piece, everyone begrudges the Jews for that. That little piece of land, they don't let them live in peace.
It's too much. You know, and interestingly enough, even Christians today that turn on Israel, don't they recognize, they should recognize that this is all part of the Judeo-Christian heritage.
That's mind-boggling to me.
True Christians, like the evangelicals say, are actually descendants of Isaac. They're not descendants of Ishmael. They come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob because Jesus was a Jew. And he went to the grave as a Jew, as a religious Jew who observed Judaism every drop more than you or I do. And I always tell my Christian friends, if Jesus were alive today, where do you think he would be? Would he be with you in church on Sunday, or would he be with the Jewish people on Saturday in the temple with me? The answer is clearly, in my view, he would be in the temple on Saturday with me.
Which one? Which shul would he be in?
Well, I don't know that. I can't say.
What sect would he belong to exactly?
Well, that's a different question. But my dear friend, Bishop Seabrooks, Gerald Seabrooks, an honorable bishop, said to me, he believes that he would be on Saturday in the synagogue or temple with us, and with him in church on Sunday. So he said, but nevertheless, the reality is that
I could see that
even the temple was the temple of Jesus, and that's where he prayed on the mount. So that belongs to the Judeo-Christian heritage. And there was no, long before Islam came into being, and there was no genetic or indigenous people, Arab people, belonging to the land of Israel.
No,
Never did. I want to go to one more word. Okay, that's connected. It is the word annexation.
So we're getting, ladies and gentlemen, we're getting a lesson in grammar today.
I apologize, but it's just that I don't have to actually.
I'm just teasing. Go for it, Bumi.
I don't have to look at the actual definition of annexation. You all know it means taking control of, or power of, and control of a parcel of land that, again, was not yours originally, that belonged to somebody else. Like when you annex land after a war. Land that you conquer, even if whether you're the attacking army or whether you're the defending army, either way, if you conquer land, you annex it, you make it part of your land, you would connect and say it's now belongs to me. It is taking from somebody else. But again, that's exactly the point. They call it an Israel. We're talking about Israel possibly annexing the West Bank now.
Yeah.
How could Israel, and this is not a matter of the word annexation, Israel cannot annex what already belongs to the Jewish people. It belongs to it. So there's a fundamental wrong in the using the terminology annexation when talking about Israel taking absolute control of all three areas of Judea and Samaria. And I think people should be aware of that. That is not annexation. That
Well,
is
the problem
taking
is
full governance over what
mainstream
already
media.
belongs to us.
And I know I'm interrupting you tonight, even though I
No,
said let's not
please,
interrupt each other. But
please. No, no, Bela,
I'm not
please, Bela.
practicing what I'm preaching.
It's
But
okay.
you know what? This is a very hot topic. So
Please.
mainstream media will contradict you over and over. That's the problem. And people who follow mainstream media will not listen to what you're saying, even though it's true.
Mainstream media has a habit of distorting and perverting the truth. When Donald Trump said at the very beginning in his first term, he kept referring to it as fake news. I had issue with what he continuously termed mainstream media being fake news. But over the years, I came to the recognition clearly and unequivocally that President Donald Trump was right.
It's true. But
What you
it's
see is
changed.
in large part fake, unless you're
Right.
watching certain mainstream channels like Fox or Newsmax. A few of the, I think they're still considered somewhat mainstream, but they still give you mostly truthful, honest reporting. Whereas if you watch the constipated news network CNN, or you watch MSNBC, or any of these other news outlets that are considered mainstream media, they are giving you total distortions, and I think people should be aware of it.
From a psychological perspective, you have to put yourself in the position of typical American. We were raised to believe that whatever we read in newspapers, right, and whatever we see on TV is true. It's gospel, right? You want to know what's going on in the news. What did this reporter say? What did this newscaster say? It becomes gospel. The problem is that over years, it's changed. What you hear and what you read is not true. So it's very difficult for people who were raised to believe that whatever they hear is true now to accept that it's fake news. It,
But
it's a,
you,
it's a difficult
you,
it's a
you as a
difficult concept
journalist,
as well. I have to tell you.
but as a professional journalist, you are aware, I'm sure, or you were aware, I'm sure, that a lot of what is being fed to us by the media, be it the or the visual media or the written media, is actually not true. It is
I
actually
know.
distortions of
Yes,
the truth.
but that's not how it used to be in the past. And
Well,
and
yeah, I believe that when
as it changed, I had a hard time accepting it because we're
well,
supposed to report the truth. That's what we're not. Journalists are not supposed to take sides. It's not our place to take sides.
I
Okay,
agree.
we're supposed to report the facts, be it true or not. We're supposed to report the facts,
That's
not
correct.
distort them.
You're
That's
right.
the
And now when you
problem.
say
Not
that
supposed
it's
to take sides.
uh,
No one is. We're not expecting. The general public is not expecting the mainstream media to take sides. That's not their job. Their job is to report the news, to
right,
report the facts. The
right.
problem is the reason why how it's become fake is because they have decided to distort the facts so that the opinion will be formed according to their own views.
Exactly.
That's
It is an agenda. It is an
and right,
agenda.
and that is not journalism.
That is not true. It's correct.
It's not.
I don't remember
That
personally so,
yeah.
but I heard of times when you had media reporting, you had a great Walter Cronkite, and you had just,
Oh well,
you get
yeah.
what did they do, ladies and gentlemen? They went ahead and they reported the news. They stated the
That's right.
fact. Here is
That's it.
what
State
happened.
the facts and then form your own
I do
opinion.
not, unless I'm a commentator being asked questions and asked my opinion, or I'm writing an op-ed opinion about something, that's something else. But generally, when you turned on the news and you watch the nightly news, you were supposed to be given, and you were mostly given years ago when I was a kid, you were given just what had occurred. You were
That's
not given
right.
opinions,
That's right.
but it
And
has changed.
today it's not called journalism anymore. It's called brainwashing.
Yeah. And I'm glad we have some journalists like you that stand up and tell it and let the people know what's going on because people have to be aware of it. And that's where we are. On that note, Bela, I want to wish everybody a great weekend. Shabbat Shalom. And we will be back next week. Hopefully, we'll be back with Bela as well.
All
Bela,
right. Stay safe, everyone.
hey, good night.
Good night. Good night.